Ladies and gentlemen, the conference will begin in 5 minutes. A loud voice. There we go. Good morning, everyone. Oh, come on. Good morning, everyone. Oh, thank you. That's what I need to get started. So welcome to the CMS 2015 Medicare Advantage and Prescription Drug Plan Audit and Enforcement Conference and Webcast. My name is Stacy Plizga, and I will be moderating the conference for you today. This morning we are gathered here at the CMS Central Office in Baltimore, where the webcast is originating from. We have a number of CMS experts that will be joining us today to share their knowledge and their expertise. In addition to the approximately 245 individuals we have with us here in-house, We also have over 3,200 joining us from the webcast. So welcome to all of you. In fact, I forgot to move my slides. We have participants from over 48 states joining us today, including Puerto Rico and Guam, so pretty impressive. We would like to welcome all of you and thank you for joining us today at what is a very important event for you to gain insights on how the MA and Part D organization can best prepare for a CMS performance audit. So before we get started, I would like to go over a few logistical items with you that may help you throughout the day. First off is materials. In an effort to go green, we do not print materials anymore. However, you can access them on the CTO website. The link is there on your screen for you, and it was also sent out to you in an email. If you have not done so, go ahead and you can access those presentations and follow along with the presenters today. We look forward to everyone's participation today. So for our webcast participants, we have set up a SurveyMonkey link for you. So if you have a presentation-related question, at any point, go to the SurveyMonkey link that you see on your screen that was also emailed out to you and enter your question there. We do ask that you limit your questions to one per session. This is what the SurveyMonkey screen looks like, and if you'll notice that it starts off with number 1, 2, it goes all the way down through, I believe, session 7, and each different number represents a different session. For instance, number 1 is the first session of the day, how to prepare for a CMS audit. So if you have a question on that session, enter it there. If your question is on a different session, for instance, the universe preparation, please enter your question there. All the questions that you send in today, we will try to address today during our event, either during the session or at the end of the day when we have an open Q&A session. If we do not get an opportunity to address it during our event today, it will be sent to the correct speaker for them to provide an answer, and it will be posted on the CTEO website at a later date. For our in-house participants, if you have a question, we ask that you get up and you move to the microphone that is in the center of the room and ask your question there. That way our in-house audience and our webcast audience will be able to hear your question. If you are having technical difficulties and you have a question, go ahead and email the CTEO tech support at cms.hhs.gov website, and we do have staff members who are there and available to assist you. If you have a conference-related question after the event today, you can go ahead and send an email to the Part C, Part D audit at cms.hhs.gov website. And when you do that, please make sure you put in the subject line, questions for 2015 audit and enforcement conference. We are glad to have all of you here with us today, both in-house and those of you who are viewing via the webcast. Our agenda today is packed with CMS experts, and we are excited to share their knowledge and expertise with you. So let's go ahead and get started. Kicking things off for us this morning, the Director for Medicare Parts C&D Oversight and Enforcement Group, Jerry Mulcahy.
Good morning, everyone. Anyone who knows me knows how klutzy I am, and so I'm sure my staff is freaking out that I have a cup of liquid up here above all the electronics, so hopefully I won't short out the podium. I'm happy to see so many of you here in the room, and as we heard, there's thousands of people on the webcast. Unfortunately, it was necessary for Sean Kavanaugh to be unexpectedly in DC this morning, so he wasn't able to come and provide the opening remarks. He sends his regards, and he's sure that we'll have a productive and successful conference. As you know, CMS is committed to driving improvement in the delivery of services to our beneficiaries enrolled in Medicare Advantage and the prescription drug plans. While we've seen growth and improvement in our program, we have more work to do to continue to improve the quality of care and services provided to our Medicare beneficiaries. We've focused on increased transparency with the industry. CMS has published our audit protocols each year, released best practice and common finding memos, provided results of the audits, and displayed enforcement action notices online. We make these resources available to you because we want to help you be compliant with the Medicare requirements. Unfortunately, overall, we're not yet seeing the kind of improvement we hoped. We started auditing our way through the industry back in 2010. We have, in the 5 years since then, dramatically improved and refined our process, often based on feedback that we've received from the sponsors who've gone through the audit process and their trade associations. We've fed that info back to the industry so that if you've not yet been audited, you have a chance to learn from those who have. What we're finding is organizations are generally still not availing themselves of the information and tools we provide to proactively test and identify ways in which enrollees are being inappropriately denied access to drugs and healthcare services. For those of you who participated last year, I stood here a year ago and provided similar comments. We're still showing up to conduct an audit, and many of the plan sponsors seem caught by surprise of what's expected. And also they're caught by surprise when they see the level of performance that we identify in the audit. Many plan sponsors seem unaware of their level of compliance in key areas like formulary administration, ODAG, and CDAG. Another challenging issue is the plan sponsor's ability to produce the universes for the audit. The protocols we release include the universe templates and a data dictionary, yet it seems plan sponsors have not attempted to pull the data and populate the universe template until they get the audit announcement letter. As a result, we added a session on universe preparation and submission to the conference today. Repeat findings continue to be particularly pervasive in the areas of CDAG and ODAG. I'd like to take a moment to put in a plug for the upcoming point of sale pilot. As part of our ongoing commitment to making the Part D coverage determination and appeal process more accessible to beneficiaries, this afternoon you'll hear about CMS's plan to conduct a Part D point of sale pilot. The pilot creates a unique opportunity for Part D plans and PBMs to partner with CMS to identify and test proactive approaches to resolving point of service rejections for certain Part D drugs without enrollees having to take additional action. We've successfully used the pilot approach previously to test and refine strategies for addressing opioid overutilization in Part D. So I hope you give serious consideration to partnering with CMS in this effort, either as a pilot participant or by sharing your current best practices in this area. I hope you find the presentation today informative and helpful to your compliance efforts. Please take the time to review the materials we've made available and do a careful evaluation of whether these are some of the same areas that your organization is struggling with, and if so, what improvements can your organization make to ensure you're compliant with the CMS rules. I think a great deal of our audience are compliance professionals or related to the compliance function at the organizations, and so if you're a compliance professional at your organization and you're concerned that the senior leadership isn't hearing your message or taking you seriously, and I said this last year, I would suggest that you have them go to our website and pull up the plans who have been sanctioned and have them contact the CEOs of those plans because it's anyone who's been through sanction and come out the other side, they have realized the cost to them both financially and their reputation and their resources. And it's much more expensive on the back end to address the problem than to do it of your own volition on the front end. With that said, I'd like to turn your attention and take a minute to talk a little bit more about my group and introduce you to some key members of my team. The Medicare Part C and D Oversight and Enforcement Group, also known internally as MOEG, is situated in the Center for Medicare, which is one of the largest components within CMS. We take our organization for granted, but I'm sure for many on the outside, CMS seems like a black box. Many of you are probably aware of our Audit and Enforcement Group, but may not be fully aware of all the work that we accomplish and the people that are the driving force behind that work. Therefore, I want to take a few minutes to talk a little more about my group, where we fit in at CMS, and introduce you to some of the key staff. All right, let me see if I do the right thing here. Did that happen? Oh, oops, yep, something happened. Okay, good. So let's start with the mission and vision. Our mission is to evaluate sponsors' performance to improve beneficiary access to health care and prescription drugs. And our vision is all Medicare Advantage and prescription drug plans enrollees have access to medically necessary covered drugs and services. So this is the organization that our shop is under, and this is the Center for Medicare. Sean Cavanaugh, who couldn't be here today, is the Deputy Administrator and Director. He's a political appointee by the Obama administration to lead the Center for Medicare. Within that Center for Medicare, on the right you have Cynthia Tudor, who's the Deputy Center Director, and this box is the Part C and D part of the Medicare operation. In the center, you have Dr. Jeff Kelman, who is the medical officer for the Center for Medicare, and those of you who've been through audit know that he helps us with reviews of clinical decision-making, among many other things that he's engaged in. On the left side is Liz Richter, the Deputy Center Director, and that's for the whole fee-for-service side of the shop. But we're going to focus on the yellow box, the Cynthia Tudor operation. So under Cynthia Tudor, there's several groups that are dedicated to the work of Medicare Advantage and Part D. So there's the Medicare Drug Benefit C&D Data Group, which is commonly called MUDBUG internally. And then we have the Medicare Drug and Health Plan Contract Administration Group, which is MCAG. And so really, the first one is really the Part Prescription Drug Program, and the second box is really the Medicare Advantage Program. And then we have Medicare Enrollment and Appeals Group, and that group handles Medicare enrollment and appeals for all parts of the program, A, B, C, and D, though they're housed here under the C and D side of the house. And then we have the Medicare Plan Payment Group that's responsible for the payment and payment policy, and then my group, which is the Medicare C&D Oversight and Enforcement Group. My deputy is Vicki Ahern, and she is in a senior executive development program, and she's doing a rotation at Social Security Administration, so she is not here, but Jennifer Smith is my acting deputy director in her absence. All right, let me see here. I wanted to talk a little bit about the people who are in what I call my front office who support me. I have a senior advisor, Trish Axt, who works on special projects, policy issues, and reviews and clears many, if not all, I think it really is all, of the audit reports on my behalf. And so Trish Axt is over here. Also, we have my special assistant, Kevin Stansberry. He's right here on the end. It's a somewhat unusual title. I think it's unique to the government, but he's essentially equivalent to perhaps my chief of staff and advisor. He's really the one who keeps everything running and ensures that we're responsive, timely, and consistent. And then we have my staff assistant, Jason Clark. He's here in the front, and he's the gatekeeper for my calendar and ensures I'm prepared each day for my day's work. He's also the person who answers the phones and greets people, and if you want to see me, he's the guy you have to go through. And he may take bribes, I don't know. I also want to recognize Ann Levenstam of my staff. She really was the person on my staff who organized this conference, along with Cynthia Kitt, who is right behind her. And she works in our business operations staff, and she arranges all of our conferences here in our side of the house on CM, and does really a wonderful job. As I watch her go through that, I'm glad that she has that job and I don't. Next, so these are the three divisions that make up my group. So the Division of Analysis, Policy, and Strategy, Audit Operations, and Compliance Enforcement. So I thought I would introduce each division director and let them tell you a little bit about what it is that they do. So first I'd like to introduce Katie Flannery, who is the acting director of the Division of Analysis, Policy, and Strategy, and is normally the deputy of that same division. Katie.
Can you all hear me? Okay. So on the slide, you can see that we've provided some details related to the scope of our division, and these include developing the audit strategy, which among other things describes the mission, vision, and goals for our program audits, the audit scope, including which elements we'll audit, which program areas. This may include pilot programs that we're thinking of for the upcoming audit year, who will be selected for audit based on our risk assessment analyses of Part C and D organizations, the number of audits that will be conducted, and program audit timelines. We are also responsible for developing new protocols and maintaining existing ones, as well as conducting audit or training on these materials. We manage the audit support contractors, the Part C and D audit and compliance program policy mailboxes, and the Part C and Part D compliance and audits website. Finally, we develop industry guidance, including HPMS memos and regulations, and report annually on program audit results and enforcement actions.
Great, thank you, Katie. I'll hand it over to Wanda to discuss DAO, and I'll change the slide.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tawanda Holmes. I'm the Division Director for the Division of Audit and Operations. And in addition to the points that's on the slide, I just want to touch on 7 key things. Number 1, I want to talk a little bit about the audit strategy. As Katie mentioned, my division assists her in developing the audit strategy in addition to the audit committee. The audit committee oversees the audit process. The audit committee includes not only the regional office staff, but the managers and technical advisors in the regional office, my division, as well as Katie's division. Myself, Jen Smith, and Ann Duarte are co-chairs of the audit committee. We enjoy working with our regional office counterparts, and clearly we could not do the audits without them. So number 2 is the audit schedule. Real briefly, before finalizing the audit schedule, we share a draft audit schedule with our colleagues in OFM for the 1/3 financial audits, as well as the duals office for the Medicare and Medicaid plans, just to minimize any conflicts. This feedback we received from sponsors who thought it was just very burdensome to have multiple audits going on at the same time. Number 3 is the audit consistency team. So this year, what we decided to do is we develop an audit consistency team, which includes regional office staff as well as central office staff. Each team lead will be responsible for conducting an audit within a specific area throughout the year. For example, the CDAG team lead will be the CDAG team lead throughout the year. In addition to that, they're meeting on a monthly basis to talk about the various issues that they find during the audits, just to ensure that we're scoring items consistently. Number 4, audit reports. As Jerry mentioned, we do have his technical advisor, senior advisor, is reviewing all audit reports. Before it even reach her, each auditor in charge is reviewing those audit reports. I get a chance to review all of those audit reports, and of course, Trish acts. She makes the final polish on those audit reports, and we're happy to have her to do that for us. Number 5 is validations. Unlike most audits, our program audits, we do not close any of the audits until we ensure that we have validated that all items were corrected. Also, just want to point out that if any sponsors feel like they need additional time, if they've done some internal testing, training, and find that items that were found on the audit still need more time to be corrected, please let your validation team know. Number 6, survey. So when we send out our draft report, we also send out a survey to receive feedback on our audit process. And this includes anything from our protocols, our process, our team, because we actually want to take that feedback and make improvements to our processes. In 2014, we had a record low. So that tells us we right on spot. But however, for 2015, we expect that we will have a high turnover in feedback in our survey. So please feel free to provide us that feedback. And lastly, finally, referrals. My division make enforcement referrals to our colleagues, Mike DeBella, who is the Division Director for the Division of Compliance Enforcement, for any sponsors what we find significant audit findings as well as validation findings. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Tawanda. And then finally, we'll talk to Mike from DCE.
Thanks, Jerry, and good morning, everyone. My name is Mike DeBella. I'm the Director in the Division of Compliance Enforcement. And our responsibility is to evaluate referrals of egregious Part C and D non-compliance. And a lot of this stems from, like Tawanda mentioned, information we glean from the program audits that are conducted, but we also get referrals of non-compliance from our Medicare Advantage group and our Part D group as well. So we do this on behalf of the center, and we evaluate each one of those referrals independently with a fresh pair of eyes, and we measure those facts up against the regulatory authority that we are bound by. The next thing we do is we develop cases for enforcement action. So we would be in charge of putting together the information, making the case, and actually executing the action. And finally, we lead the oversight of sponsors while under intermediate sanctions or termination proceedings. So these things can take some time to play out. Intermediate sanctions, we'll go over that later today, can last many, many months, and termination proceedings as well. So thank you all, and I look forward to speaking with you all more about that later today.
Great, thanks, Mike. We're out of time. I think we're running a little long, so I'm excited about the agenda for today's conference, and I want to thank you again for attending. Please join me in welcoming the rest of our speakers. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Jerry, and to our panel members for joining us for the intro session. Our next presenter, Charles Cutcliffe, from our sponsoring organization Viva Health, is here to provide insight into their 2014 CMS program audit, including how they prepared for the audit, lessons learned, and best practices identified during the audit process. Daryl Brookins and Matthew Gerund, I know I was going to mess that up, from the Division of Audit Operations will then provide you with an overview of the key changes in the 2015 CMS program audit process and 2014 validation process.
Good morning. I'm Charlie Cutcliffe, and I'm the compliance officer with Viva Health. And as Stacy said, we've been asked to come and speak about our experiences and lessons learned in preparing for and going through the CMS program audit. So before I get started, I will say I would much rather be out in the audience with you today. But if anybody who's been through these conferences before, you've seen how persuasive Tawanda can be. And you get Tawanda and Daryl, my co-panelist, on the phone, it is really hard to tell them no. So with that being said, what I'd like to do is kind of go through a quick overview, introduce you to Viva and our compliance program, things that we did prior to the audit, things we did once we received the audit notice, things that we did during the audit, and some final takeaways. So Viva Health, we are headquartered in Birmingham, Alabama. Our Medicare Advantage program, at the time of the audit, we were in 24 counties in Alabama with 5 PBPs, about 43,000 members, including one dual SNP of about 18,000 members. So now we tried to build a culture of compliance, and at the risk of sounding cliche, compliance has to start from the top, because if management buys into it and senior management buys into it and demonstrates their buy-in to it, it makes it a lot easier to get everybody else to buy into it. So some of the ways that we tried to build the culture of compliance is we have a quarterly report for the board. So we prepare a written report for the board, and if schedules permit, I also present that to them personally. And we also, as important with that, we have a direct line of communication. So I can reach the board if I have any questions or concern, and more importantly, they can reach me or anybody in my staff as well. We also have standing bi-weekly meetings with our senior management so we can give them an update of what we're working on or any issues or concerns that we may have. And they can also share of any issues or questions they may have or things that they'd like us to look at. And then we also have a standing bi-weekly Medicare operations meeting, which include management and personnel from every department that works in Medicare in our group. So that in those meetings, we have standing reports from every group, but it also allows a forum that we can talk about any issues or outstanding items that may be up, especially anything that expands across multiple departmental boundaries. And to help create a compliance awareness throughout the company, we use company-wide emails. We have a company newsletter. We try to make sure that we have an article, a HIPAA or compliance article in every newsletter. On our intranet page, we post all of our compliance policies and procedures, and we also post the CMS managed care manuals as well. So make sure that everybody has access to the most current manuals and the most current policies and procedures. We also make an effort to meet with our departments regularly, so they know us as Charlie, they know us as Teresa or Matt versus just the compliance department on the 14th floor. And then some other things that we've done, some feedback that we received from our compliance committee. We created wallet cards, which, as the name sounds, are just cards that fit in your wallet, also fit right there with your ID badge. And it has instructions on how to report a compliance issue or raise a question and the contact information. So that's at somebody's fingertips always. And then we also took our full compliance plan, all 25 pages of it, boiled it down into 2 pages front and back, laminated it, and give it to everybody so they can post it in their workstation. And it's a quick reference for the compliance materials without having to thumb through the entire compliance plan. And we've also used the monitor. We have monitors in our break rooms, and during our annual training times, we'll run those training slides through the monitors as well during that time period. So we found that for our audit success, it really starts now. It came from every operational area owning and working with compliance and owning their requirements throughout the year. Our compliance staff is really rather small, so we're there to lead, coordinate, motivate, and monitor and work with the teams throughout the year. And we also, prior to the audit, we made an intentional effort to create a healthy respect amongst everybody about the audit. We wanted to make sure they understood the significance and how serious this was. We shared results, the good and the bad, to let them know that CMS is very serious about this, and as they said before, the plans are being fined, and we did not want that to happen to us as well. We tried to coordinate and distribute all of our HPMS memos, and so we could track that. One of the lessons that we did learn during the program audit was not only did we have who we distributed the HPMS memo to, now we're actually tracking the email, so we can show when and exactly who it went to, and we're tracking the results of that as well. And then we also used the CMS best practice memos, and we went through those and compared them to what we're doing, and we learned some things, and we had some shortfalls that we had to correct, and were able to correct prior to the audit. So the audit protocols or the audit playbook, we try to get those and review those as quickly as possible. So then we try to share that with all of our departments, including our FDRs, because they're going to be a big part of the audit as well. And then once we've shared it, we sat down with each of them to make sure we're all in agreement, because there are certain things that are going to be up to interpretation, and we all in agreement with this is the requirement. And if not, we want to make sure we ask CMS. And then we tried to identify any data that we didn't have readily available and set time frames so we could get that, so we could have that, to have these universes ready, because our goal is we wanted to pull the universes monthly. So we did that one to see, it helps us make sure that we can pull the universes when the time is required. It would also provided samples for our internal audits and our practice webinars. It serves as a great monitoring tool, especially for CDAG and ODAG for timeliness or identifying any issues. We could look at that and identify that. And also we found too, and when it came to the actual audit, it was a great starting point. So if we had the monthly universes already, all we had to pull is what we didn't have, put it together, and start the QA process. So our internal audits, we've made an effort to base them on the CMS audit protocols. So again, Once we got into actually doing a full internal audit, we did a deeper dive into the universe to make sure the universe protocols, that we were pulling it correctly and pulling it the way we thought we were. It was also good practice for our departmental audit teams. And then, because our goal when we're conducting an audit, we want to exceed the standards, not just meet the standards. So when the actual audit time comes, we're ready to go. And also, we learned too, is we can't forget those areas that are not specifically covered in the CMS program audit, because every area is connected through that as well. Our internal audits, the way we conducted it, were different than the webinars, the way the CMS program audit is conducted. So we realized we needed to practice and do some things to get ready for that. So to start, we focused on individual groups. We started with our Part C grievances or maybe our coverage determination teams, so we could focus on that team and use our time wisely so we could identify what systems and screens that we need to find a logical path to walk through a sample from beginning to end, so we can give a complete, concise answer from beginning to end for each sample, so we can use our time as wisely as possible. And then we also learned through our practice, you can't forget the basics. There are going to be systems, there are going to be screens that everybody in your organization is familiar with, but it may not be so for the outside auditor. So you got to be able to explain all of those as well. And then we tried to treat these webinars like this real CMS audit, meaning we got tough. I mean, we challenged them on the questions, we challenged them on their answers. I will say we had some tense moments during some of our initial practice sessions. Ultimately, there were times I don't think the teams liked us very much, but ultimately they did thank us for us when we got through with it. And then finally, so again, we started small, and then we worked up to the full team. So then we'd have a full CDAG team in there. So for example, if we were working on an appeal, we could go back and look at the original coverage determination, and we had a fairly seamless transfer from one team to the other. And during our sessions, we also made sure we gave feedback. What went well, and then where are the opportunities to improve during that. And we also learned too, give yourself a lot more time. Our initial practice sessions for each of these individual areas took a whole lot longer than they did for the actual true audit as well. We also, during these practice sessions, we tried to establish webinar teams. So we were going to identify who were going to be our presenters, who were going to be the note takers, who were going to be the researchers. We had contact information for everybody. We had backup for information, so in case somebody was out of the office when the audit time came. And then we held those rosters in both the compliance department and in the operational department. So in case when the audit came, the person out of the office was the one in the operational department holding the audit. Holding the roster. We had one available. We also our goal, we wanted to make sure we had compliance presence in every room during the webinars. So during our practice session, we made sure we had compliance personnel in there. It'd give them a chance to experience the audit from the other side, but also they could help explain the audit process through there and help shape the answers and identify explain where the auditor was trying to go and where the questions leading, to help the whole process and understand what the process was. And we learned too, when we were playing the auditor in the other room, we had to play both CMS and our coach. So many times during that time, we would go through something and then take a time out and say, okay, I'm putting my compliance back on, I made my compliance hat back on, and so we could give immediate feedback. Again, what went well and where are some opportunities to improve for next time as well. The audit practice, if we have an opportunity, we found it very helpful. That we had we had some external consultants come in to help us, and we found it helped validate and confirm what we were doing, and also we learned some things we weren't quite doing correctly. It helped for both our universe preparation and our sample review. It also was good to have another perspective, so it wasn't compliance in the other room, it wasn't just Charlie and Teresa in the other room, but it was somebody different. And for example, we used in 2012, we had a consultant come in to review our first attempts at the CMS audit universes, and so again, make sure that we were pulling those correctly. And then in 2014, we had scheduled a CDAG audit, and as it was, we had that audit literally a week to 2 weeks right before the audit. So we were able to learn a lot from that. We learned not only that we could apply from the CDAG team, but we could apply to the other teams as well. So it's Friday morning. You've just gotten the complimentary phone call from CMS saying that the official audit notice is coming on Monday. So step one, Whatever you need to say, catch your breath, and then move on. Step 2, go ahead and notify the department, get them up and running. Go notify the CEO, let them know. And then one of the things we learned too is make sure that check the CEO's access to HPMS if it's current, because they only get in it once or twice a year. It may be lapsed, and they're going to have to be in it during the audit process as well. Step 3, go ahead and notify your teams. Don't forget the FDRs, don't forget your IT teams, and don't forget your the PBMs as well. And then step 4, go ahead and tell your family, set the expectations, because there are going to be some long days, there are going to be some extra days, so just make sure that everybody's aware of what's going on. So then we tried to meet. We sat down and met with each department individually. So we could confirm where our universes were, where are we as far as getting those ready. We finalized our webinar teams to see who was in the office to make sure somebody wasn't going to be out, and also confirm who were going to be on multiple teams that we may have to schedule around. And we took this time too to reinforce with each of the teams that this is a collaboration with CMS. We are not adversaries through this audit process. We are working together to get better. CMS will provide a schedule, so we tried to prepare our audit preparation around that schedule. We put together a list of questions, an extensive list of questions, to make sure again that we're all on the same page, and we had no assumptions going, or try to reduce the number of assumptions we had going into it. And we tried to take advantage of the calls with the CMS Audit Universe teams, because you get a chance to speak with the teams exactly. So again, to make sure everybody's on the same page as far as what the expectations are going to be in the audit or in the universes and the sample review. And with the new universe protocols this year with the 3 strikes and you're out, it's even more so important to make sure you get that squared away at the beginning. Also, we had to work with CMS to schedule around key personnel. For example, our appeals and grievances team do both C and D, so we had to schedule the ODAG and CDAG sessions to make sure that they could be available for both, and same thing for our medical director as well. And then we also took that time to establish a process for uploading all the documents. Who's going to pull it, who's going to review it, who's going to make sure it gets uploaded, and who uploads it, and who makes sure that it was uploaded. Then we started with the universes, and we had to review them multiple times. It's got to be reviewed by the department, it's got to be reviewed by the compliance department, and keep going back until it's exactly right, or as close as you can get it. This is where we found where we had the monthly universes was very helpful. Those teams that had it could just put it together and go right into the QA process. We had some teams that had gone through a system upgrade and they had not finalized their report. It was more stressful for them as they had to finalize the reporting and then get the universes ready and get it QA'd and get it uploaded as well. So we also then realized that we were going to have at least 4 different webinars going on simultaneously. So we had to find the rooms where we were going to do these webinars during the audit. We tried to get them close together so the compliance and the key personnel could go back and forth as easily as possible. And then we wanted to have in each one a large monitor so everybody in the room could see what the presenter would see, what the auditor sees. And then we also wanted multiple computers in there, so we had monitor tied into who was actually presenting, but everybody else working simultaneously in other systems or other screens. So if a question came up, we had the answer, or if we needed to, we could just shift presenters versus having the presenter try to log on and log off and bring it back up. We found it was helpful for us. We used our training rooms. So as we worked and identified the rooms we wanted to use, we had to make sure we had the right software, both internal systems and also the CMS webinar system, our software that was available. And then we tried to assign seats, not necessarily being that strict, but just to make sure we had key personnel together, so to help efficiency, so they could, if needed to collaborate, they were right there together. And then we put up posters and reminders in each of the rooms. Again, some of the basic things, again, show the member focus throughout all our answers, silence the cell phones, turn your email off. You don't want email popping up during the webinar. Again, giving the answers, nothing but the facts. And then you can't see it, but it does make a difference. Answer with a smile. And then finally, we put some words of encouragement on each of those as well. So you submitted the universe. Now you've got time to practice. So we want to make sure we practiced in the rooms where the webinars are scheduled, so we could make sure that everything worked as we thought it would. We learned some things where our original idea on the phone system worked great for small groups, didn't work real well when we scaled it up to the big team, to the full teams. And also, practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. So you have to practice. When you practice it, you've got to practice these as if they are the CMS actual webinar. And then during that, we challenged the teams. We realized that the samples are not going to be random; they're targeted. So we did the same. We asked tough questions. We wanted to make sure we identified any issues ahead of time. We did not want to be surprised. And then we ultimately found out we practiced several of the audit samples that came up during each of the different webinar sessions. And again, we challenged the teams. We wanted to see if anybody was going to cave or anybody was going to get defensive. Either one is not good. And also, and then during that time, we make sure we debrief, again, identify what went well, where are the opportunities we can improve to get ready for the actual session. And then we also make sure that we could do clear, concise answers. The better we can answer every question in every sample during the actual webinar, fewer nights later, trying to pull a sample, having to pull it, review it, and get it uploaded. So the audit week is finally here. Go ahead and come early, be ready to go. We knew that CMS was going to post the samples about an hour or so before the webinar. So we had teams dedicated for each of the different sessions checking for the samples. So as soon as the samples were available, we could send a group text to the actual departmental teams, and also we had the samples saved in a shared drive, so everybody had access to get the maximum amount of time to start looking at it. And then during the audit, we shared results from our compliance team via text and email, again, what went well, lessons learned that we could share between the different teams. It's going to be a very busy week. During the days are going to be full, so we provided lunch and refreshments. So the team members, when they had a chance, they could catch their breath and debrief a little bit, or also start preparing for the next session. And also, you've got to be prepared. There are going to be some different samples that may have to be uploaded every day. And we do recommend compliance review every sample to make sure you get another set of eyes looking at it to make sure that you're answering the question that is being asked. For our compliance team, we try to regroup at every break, again, and any issues or things that we could learn to share amongst the different teams. We also try to get an idea of what preliminary sample documentation, so we get a plan for getting that documentation pulled and reviewed and uploaded. And at the end of the day, we came together, did the same thing. We also discussed our expectations for the next day. We prepared an update for management because they certainly wanted to know what's going on. We see if there's anything else requested for compliance program effectiveness, and then if there was any issues that we identified with pulling the audit, so we could let CMS know ahead of time. And finally, some webinar intangibles. Again, it's a collaboration. It's not us versus them. We tried to make sure that everybody knew we were working with CMS to try to use this to get better. Then customer service 101, Southern charm, if you want to call it, try to answer with a smile. It does make a difference as you're doing that. And be confident when you give an answer. At least project an air of confidence. It'll help you. It'll help your team. It'll also help the audit team of the auditor have confidence in the answers that you're giving. And be ready to think before you answer. And if you need to, take a minute. It's okay to respectfully ask CMS to take a minute, put the phone on mute, collaborate, come up with the answer you want to give. And finally, again, cliche, be flexible and expect the unexpected. The one thing that stands out for us was as we finished up our CDAG webinar in the very last session, we literally had a parade come down the street right outside the building with bands and fire trucks and everything. So it was a great send-off to the CDAG webinar, but it was a little distracting as we finished that up. So second week, CMS is going to be on site. Send a reminder to everybody to let them know they're going to be there. Use that opportunity for a little spring cleaning. Send a few compliance and HIPAA reminders. It's amazing to get everybody's attention when they know CMS is going to be there. And also, you remind everybody that CMS will interview employees. And then we tried to, for those employees that were interviewed, we tried to go get them personally, try to put them at ease. Again, let them know CMS is not out to get them, and that reinforce to them, just be open and transparent, and be honest and transparent. That's all we can ask for. When the CMS is on site, make sure you have a large room big enough to hold 6 to 8 people. If you can, have 1 or 2 other rooms so they could do interviews simultaneously. And then also, if the monitor where CMS is not right where you are, have somebody designated to watch the room. So if there is a question, you can answer that as quickly as possible and help prevent any accidental interruptions as well. Be ready for the tracer samples. There will be samples from issues that were identified in the previous week's audit or things that identified in the documentations you've uploaded, and be ready to explain each of the 7 elements of effective compliance program during that as they apply, and then that will be done with both compliance and departmental personnel. And then finally, some of the operational best practices that CMS identified that for what we were doing is one of the things they liked the fact that all of our quality of care grievances were reviewed by the medical director. They liked the fact that we had a written response for all of our Part C grievances, and they liked our process to categorize grievances and we had written responses from each department engaged in the resolution. Some things that were noted during the individual sessions were the individual denial letters, where we had language that was relevant to both the member and to the provider, and we were able to document multiple outreaches when we needed additional information to make an ODAG, an organization or a coverage determination decision. And we could document who made the outreach, when it was made, what method, and what the outcome of that was. And we were also able to demonstrate a culture of member focus in all of our decisions. So finally, some final takeaways. Again, just be open and transparent during this whole process. Let the auditors know of anything that you've discovered. It's better than letting them show you. It's better than trying to hope they're not going to find it. And also, and if you have a plan if you've identified an issue and you've got a plan to correct it, go ahead and share it with them. Let them know that you're working on it and you're already taking care of it. And also, because there's so many things that are up to interpretation, if you disagree with an interpretation, it's okay to challenge the auditors, but make sure you come back with documentation of why you're challenging. We won some, we lost some. And finally, the takeaways, it's a team effort. It's going to require everybody that's in the audit teams during those sessions, but it's also going to take the team members who are covering for them during that week, because everyday work is still going on. And our HR and our IT teams went above and beyond to make sure that we had the teams and the equipment ready, or the rooms and the equipment ready that we needed for that. And finally, our success came from we have really good people who know what to do, and they want to do it right all the time. And we challenged ourselves throughout the year to make sure we were in compliance with the rules. And finally, audit preparation has to start now. You can't wait till that audit notice comes, because what you do now will set the tone for the audit and the expectations for the audit. And regardless of how you practice and prepare in the weeks between the notice and the audit start, if you're doing it right now, it'll show. If not, it will show. So I've spoken a long time, so let me turn it over to Daryl Brookins, who would tell you about the audit practice.
Well, I almost feel as though Charlie has said it all. But again, my name is Daryl Brookins, and I am with the Division of Audit Operations in the Medicare Oversight and Enforcement Group. And I must say, I had the distinct pleasure of being the audit lead for Viva Health, so I was the one that made that call to Charlie after the audit engagement letter was sent. And we had a really good, successful audit. But what I want to do today, and this is pretty much coincides with the presentation that Charlie gave. He kind of gave his perspective as far as experiencing the audit process that we had the pleasure of working with him on. But what I'm going to do is kind of step a little bit back and kind of focus just on some of the changes from the 2014 audit process, and many of what I may say you may have heard Charlie mention, but I may kind of just give just a little background as far as maybe some of the reasoning for why we made some of these changes. So again, these are just some of the highlights of the audit process for 2015. As was mentioned before, there is an audit engagement letter sent to the sponsor, and it is sent 6 weeks prior to the start of the audit. And a lot of the changes that I'll mention here is based upon feedback from sponsors, as well as lessons learned that we, the audit team, learned while conducting this audit. So the period of time is to give enough time for the sponsor to prepare for the audit, for preparation of universes and such. Secondly, we hold universe calls with the sponsor within 1 week. Within 1 week of issuing an engagement letter, we do hold a follow-up call with the sponsor. And again, the purpose of this follow-up call is essentially to go over the audit engagement letter, ensure that if the sponsor has any questions prior to the start of the audit, we can address those questions. We want to make sure that everything is clear, so that when we're ready to prepare to start the audit, there'll be as few hiccups as possible. So that's the purpose of the follow-up call once the engagement letter is issued. Thirdly here, the sponsor submits an audit issue summary, as well as beneficiary impact analyses. And this is done within 5 days of issuance of the audit engagement letter. What CMS wishes to do or looks to do in doing this goal, or performing or receiving this issue summary rather from the sponsor, CMS, we attempt to gain full understanding of any self-disclosed or self-identified issues prior to the universe submission to CMS. Again, as Charlie mentioned in his presentation, if there are any want to make us aware of prior to the start of the audit, we want to be made aware of those issues, address those issues, talk over those issues with the sponsor prior to the audit start. And a key date to keep in mind is the date that that engagement letter is issued. That's a key date you want to keep in mind when disclosing to us any issues. We want to have an understanding, again, prior to submission of the universe, prior to pulling samples, because the better idea we have of any issues you want to present to us up front, the better off we both will be. And it will be a big help in the long run. Next, the sponsor submits 15 days of issuance of the audit engagement letter. So we receive the universes. Next, CMS conducts a universe validation webinars for CDAG and ODAG once these universes are deemed complete. Again, one of the things that we want to make mention of, as Charlie mentioned, when we receive the universes, it is our attempt to receive, based on what we requested, accurate universes the first time. And again, this has been some feedback and some lessons learned we've learned on previous audits. When we're pulling samples, the better data that we have, the more able and the better we are to pull the samples that will enable us to conduct a successful audit. So we focus on CDAG and ODAG because we have found that these are two of the operational areas that we've had the most challenges. So we do have these sessions prior to, once the universes are deemed complete, so that if there are any issues, we can go back to the sponsor, and if there's a need to resubmit universes, we have an opportunity to do that. So next we come to the audit, and as Charlie mentioned, there are 2 weeks time span that the actual audit takes place. During week 1, CMS does conduct the program audit all via webinar. It's all done virtually. And we focus on the key program areas, which again are conducted simultaneously via the webinar. One thing I will mention, prior to week 1, the sponsor does have an audit schedule. All the logistics have been worked out, so hopefully by the time we get to week 1, everything runs as smoothly as possible. But if there has to be some modifications in the schedule, they're done. So we do focus on the key areas: compliance, formulary, CDAG, ODAG, and SNP mock. And I will mention during week 1 for compliance, as was mentioned earlier, there are 2 tracer sessions that we conduct for compliance during week 1. During week 2 of the audit process, the compliance team actually comes on site to conduct a compliance program effectiveness audit. During this week, the compliance team will conduct 3 tracer sessions. There will also be interviews conducted with the Medicare compliance officer, as well as the SIU FWA director, and with employees. The compliance team coming on site is pretty much, we do investigative work. There are a series of asking questions, listening for responses, observation, and again, in the interviews that we conduct with several key people within the organization, we look to glean a lot from your compliance program and get an idea of its effectiveness through these through these interviews. And as Charlie mentioned, there are 10 random employee interviews. We want to get a full spectrum of persons at your organization to get an idea of your compliance program effectiveness. So that's basically just the highlights of the audit program as far as what we do and some of the activities that take place prior to the audit, during the audit. But after the audit is done, we're not done. My colleague Matt Garand is going to come now and discuss the validation process of these activities that we carry out with you. Thank you so much.
All right, morning everyone. I'm here to touch base on just a few changes that are happening now with our validation process. And for those who aren't aware, our validation process occurs at a minimum 90 days after the final report is issued to plans. So let me try to figure this out. I think that works. The first thing I'd like to touch base on is special need plans model of care. This was added to our our audit protocols officially in 2014, so we had to add this to the validation process as well. And for SNP mock conditions, these will be validated by conducting a system walkthrough. And for those who aren't familiar with the systems walkthrough, what we will do is we will walk through with a sponsor your internal systems, and we will review any internal testing, system changes, policy and procedure revisions, any updated trainings, and quality assurance that was put into place by the plan that would give CMS reasonable assurance that any conditions found within SNP-MOC have been validated. The next change for validations is formulary administration. So for formulary administration, we are actually validating 2014 conditions using test claims. So for all FA ICARs and CARs, the sponsoring organization will submit and present test claims that are relevant to a drug that was impacted by the condition found during the audit. We do expect that the sponsor submits to CMS all screenshots related to the test claim prior to the CMS validation webinar. So if we have any questions related to the submission, we can ask those during the review. For formulary administration transition, CMS expects that the sponsor show that the member in the test claim will be eligible for a transition fill. All right. Next is closing an audit. For sponsors who fail validation, these sponsors will be referred to our Division of Compliance Enforcement for further review and possible action. And then for any sponsors who receive an audit closeout letter from CMS that have any open conditions left, the sponsor's account manager will take a notice of noncompliance for any sponsor that has open conditions in their closeout letter. And then lastly, we have some potential changes for 2016. CMS's final rule, effective March 16th, 2015, amended the MA and Part D program regulations by adding new provisions to our Program Audit and Inspection Authority, which allows CMS to require a sponsor to hire an independent auditor to conduct a review and attest that deficiencies found during a program audit were corrected. We are still working out some of the details with this, but one thing we are sure of is sponsors who receive a CMP or sanction will be required to obtain an independent auditor to verify that the deficiencies found during the audit have been corrected. So that is all I have, just a few quick changes. I hope I didn't put everybody to sleep, but if I did, it's time to wake up because we have a question and answer session coming. So that's all I have. All right.
All right, we do have a few minutes to take some questions from our audience. So if there are any in-house guests, if you would go to the microphone, tell us who you are, where you're from.
Affinity Health Plan. My question involves the employee interviews. What criteria will you use to select the employees to be interviewed?
Well, I will say it can go a number of ways. I know there have been experiences when I've been a compliance team lead. We do conduct a walkthrough of your facility, and some compliance team leads, as they're walking through, they may, particular areas in your organization, they may identify key people while they're walking through that they may want to select for an interview. Of course, they would let the compliance officer know, that they've identified someone. Or when there is an employee universe that's received, they may select from that universe. But again, it could go either one of those two ways. But you'll be fully made aware of who they would like to choose for the interview, for that process.
And just a follow-up question. This may seem silly, but our plan does a number of different things: Medicare, Medicaid, QHP. Will the employees selected be strictly those that are involved in some way with Medicare, or could it be any employee?
Yes, it would be someone that touches Medicare in some way.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that question. We also did receive some questions from our viewing audience, so I would like to address those. And the first one, I believe, is for Charlie, and it is, who performs your internal audits? Is it your compliance area, or is there a separate internal audit group?
Well, at the time we went through the audit, it was our compliance department. Since then, we've actually made a change and we've split apart. So now we have compliance and we have our compliance audit and privacy group. So that's how we're doing it now.
Okay, thank you. And I do have one more question here that came in from our viewing audience, and that is, how does CMS view vendors of a plan versus the plan itself? Meaning, when CMS audits the plan, are vendors viewed as an extension of the plan?
I think I'll take that one. So our current position is we have the contract with the sponsor. So the vendor is representing the sponsor. We don't have a relationship with the vendor. So we look at them as one person, one entity. And if someone had like a clarifying follow-up question, I'll take it, because it sounded like that one came from the room. I hope I answered your question.
That one actually came from our viewing audience.
Okay.
So if they do have a follow-up question, they can send it in, and we would be happy to address it at the end of the day during the Q&A session. And we do have one more question from our in-house audience.
Yes, it was the follow-up question to that, because I work for a vendor and we receive all the claims from the plans we submit to CMS. So to that extent so if you audit one of our clients, what would you need from us? Are we being audited as well since we handle their data? I'm kind of trying to learn what things do I have to keep in mind as we build our product to make sure I'm abiding by all regulations.
Right, so that's a good question. We often receive other questions about that. So one of the things that we try to encourage sponsors and to share with their vendors is the protocols and the universes and the record layout, so they can do their own internal audits around various issues. One of the things that we suggest the sponsors do, and I think Charles touched on this, and last year we had another sponsor talk about, is that they will actually go out and do their audits of their vendors to make sure that they're able to receive the universes in a format that CMS will require during an audit.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, well, we are just about out of time, so thank you for your questions. And I would also like to thank Charles, Daryl, Matt, and Tawanda for joining us today and presenting and answering the questions. So thank you very much. Our next speakers are from the Division of Analysis, Policy, and Strategy, and they will provide an overview of the new records layouts and discuss the best way for sponsors to pull the data needed for an audit. I am happy to introduce to you Jennifer Smith and Katie Flannery.
Good morning. I'm Jennifer Smith, the Director of the Division of Analysis, Policy, and Strategy. Katie will join me later for the Q&A part of the presentation. Before I get started, I just really wanted to take a minute to thank Charles Cutcliffe from Viva Health. Hopefully, I won't overlap too much with what he had to say, but I have to tell you, if there was ever a playbook that would get you ready for a CMS audit, that was it. So, and I know how valuable it is to hear from CMS, but I'm not foolish enough to think that it isn't even more valuable to hear from your peers who actually have to go through this in the industry. So I want to thank him and thank Todd Shamash in advance for coming in and presenting at our conference today. So, as Jerry mentioned, we have had a lot of issues with universe submission, and we've changed some of the rules around that. So we added a session to talk about universe preparation and submission. And you know, as I'm speaking now, we've already received, I think, somewhere between 11 and 15 questions on the webcast, and I'm not even done yet. So I'm a little nervous. And I just want to say, too, that, we use these terms at CMS and we think that everyone knows what we mean. And I'm sure that most of the people in the room and on the webcast are very familiar with what we are talking about when we say universes. But we got feedback last year, and you'd be surprised how there were people on the webcast who were like, I'm not attending a conference at NASA. Like, why are you talking about universes? What do you mean? So forgive me, but I just wanted to take a minute in case there are some people on the webcast or in the room who maybe are new to this and don't know what we mean. I am not talking about outer space. I am not talking about a galaxy far, far away. When we are talking about universes, we are basically talking about the entire complete set of data that we will be collecting, that we will use to select samples for part of an audit. So for example, let's do CDAG. We will be asking for all of the coverage determinations you processed for the 3-month period prior to the date on your audit start notice. That is one universe that you will be asked to submit. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about universes. So as you can imagine, and I think Charles' presentation hinted at, if you are not prepared to pull universes and you can't pull them accurately or timely, it's going to adversely impact our ability to conduct the audit, and it's probably going to adversely affect your ability to perform well on the audit. So I'm hoping that by discussing some of the issues that we've seen around preparation and submission, as well as some of the rules that we've changed, these will give you some ideas about how to prepare and be ready when it's your turn for an audit. All right. So I'm guessing that many of you in the room and on the webcast have already downloaded the 2015 audit protocols. For those of you that haven't, please go do that and look at them. Don't wait, as Charles said, until you get that audit engagement letter. At that point, it's probably already too late. The more prepared in advance you are, the better off you'll be. You'll hear me say that a couple times. But for those of you who have downloaded our protocols, you've seen that at the end of each protocol, there's a series of what we call record layouts. Each record layout represents one universe that we're requesting. And again, if you see coverage determinations as an example, there's a variety of information that we need about those coverage determinations in order to actually conduct our audit. So date and time you received the request, date and time you made oral notification to the enrollee, date and time that the written notification followed up from the enrollee. We include not only all of the field names, but as the description of the field. So as Jerry referred to it as kind of like a data dictionary explaining what we want in each of those fields. And I'll go through one record layout a little bit later in the presentation, but I promise I'll go through it quickly because if we went through all of them, you would all be asleep and we'd be here all day. So I think the biggest changes is the way we collect information in CDAG and ODAG. Previously, CDAG had 3 universes and ODAG had 4 universes. So, all of your approvals, whether they were expedited or standard, coverage determinations or redeterminations, all those approvals were in one universe. Another universe was all of your denials. Again, didn't matter about the type of request, they were all together. Same thing with grievances, and in ODAG there was one additional universe, which was dismissals. In 2015, we've broken all of those requests out. So we're still asking for all of the same data, but now expedited coverage determinations are one universe. Standard coverage determinations are one universe. And that would be all approvals and denials of those coverage determinations would be that one universe. So it's a little bit different in the way we're asking for them. But I have heard from some individuals that obviously the reprogramming of your systems to pull that data has been a little bit hairy, but I also have heard from individuals in the industry that they really like that they've got these distinct universes, that there's only one time frame that applies to each universe, and it's much easier for them to conduct their own internal timeliness tests and match up to CMS results. Whereas before, since you had all of those different requests lumped into one universe, it was a little bit more difficult, I think, for people to apply the timeliness tests. So some of the other changes, for those of you who've read through the protocols, you've probably noticed that we've put a limit on the number of times that you can resubmit your universes, and I'll go over that a little bit more later in my presentation. We've also increased the amount of time between the receipt of the audit engagement letter until when the audit actually starts. It used to be 4 weeks, it's now 6 weeks. We also, as part of that, increase the amount of time you have to submit your universes. Since we put a limit on it, how many times you can resubmit, we thought we'd give you an extra week. So you have 2 weeks, 2 extra weeks overall from the date you get that engagement letter until your audit's going to start, and you have 1 extra week from 2 weeks to 3 weeks now to actually submit your universes. Another thing that we're doing that's new this year is we have pre-audit data validation webinars for just the ODAG and the CDAG universes. Those are strictly designed, hopefully, to be very quick. If your universes are accurate and they're clean, it should be a clean process. If they're not, it will not be. It could be time-consuming and very inefficient for everybody involved. But basically, the whole point of those sessions are simply to just very quickly check that the dates and times you provided to us in your universes are the same as what's in your system. And as soon as we can verify that, we'll move through all of the universes very, very quickly. So, while we are putting a limit on the universe submissions, I think, we've scheduled the webinars, we've given more time to submit universes, and I also want to just point out that a few days after you get that audit start notice, Tawanda and her folks will schedule a call with you to go over, the request for universes, ask you if you have any questions. I would really, really advise you, don't just have the compliance officer in the room for that call. Have the people that are going to pull the data. Have everybody in the room that could potentially have questions about what we're asking for, because so many times I'll hear from Tawanda and her people that they had the call, nobody had any questions, and then it's the day that the universes are due, and they get like 15 questions asking them, I don't understand what I'm supposed to give you. So utilize those times that you can get in touch with us to to go ahead and get your questions answered. So why is universe preparation so important? I think we've hinted at it already, but there are real adverse consequences to not being able to produce your universes and getting your data pulled and submitted accurately. You see that I've got the mailbox up there. Please, we get hundreds of questions on all things audit and enforcement in that mailbox. We usually have an average response time of 1 to 2 days. So if you have a question, please feel free to submit it. We will get it answered as quickly as possible. We're constantly monitoring that mailbox, and we're happy to help you. And as I've said, don't wait until you get the start notice. Ask us now. You'll be happy that you did, and things will go much more smoothly. Also, please remember, I want to make a plug here that if you have certain functions contracted out, for example, maybe for ODAG you have certain physician groups or multiple physician groups or other provider groups processing your organization determinations, or maybe you have them processing grievances. Remember, when you're pooling universes, you're not just pooling what you do in-house. You're pooling everything, any of those functions that your downstream entities are doing. And so when you're doing those mock pools, if you're doing them like Charles was doing them, make sure you're including all your FDRs. Make sure that not only your internal systems, but their systems can pool all of these universes, and that you can then compile them fairly easily. If you do this up front, again, it will smooth everything in getting ready for the audit. Especially if you have FDRs that could be on different platforms, may or may not have, differing levels of sophistication with respect to their systems. So just something to keep in mind. And once your systems are properly programmed, really do take advantage and pull those mock universes, include your FDRs in that exercise. So once you've completed a mock pool, or even if you haven't, please QA your data before you submit it. It might sound silly, but you'd be surprised how many times we get universes with entire fields that are just completely blank. And that is something that you guys can catch before you send it into CMS. If there's a date in the time field, for example, that's something that you could easily catch if you just eyeball the data before you send it in. So I wanted to give you guys some examples of common issues, real life issues we've seen, just so that you will have some idea of things to look for with respect to universe preparation. So we've seen data in the wrong fields, just like I mentioned. So when we've, date and time field or vice versa, missing data, and this is not, fields that were not applicable. It was truly just blank fields. What I'll call nonsensical data. So we've had universes where your decision date predated your receipt of the request date. So unless you're clairvoyant or you have a time machine, that's probably not accurate data. So again, something that you can catch if you QA. Inappropriate data, so this is more of a transition issue. So on a few audits now, we've had sponsors submit continuing members in the new member files, which basically made the samples that the formulary team pulled unusable. So the sponsor had to resubmit all their data, the team had to select all new samples. It delays the audit process, and it's more work for all of you to have to redo all of that. We've also had issues where universes are never going to be able to be complete or accurate. So some examples, back to FDRs. We've had gone to sponsors where their FDRs were apparently not aware that they needed to keep track of the organization determinations or the grievances that they were performing for their parent organization. And so when it came time for audit, they had nothing to submit. So the parent organization was left with telling CMS that, well, there's a whole part of my universe that you can't have because I don't know what it is. I can't say that it's timely. I can't even say that it was done. You don't want to find yourself in that position. So make sure your FDRs know what they're responsible for. Another one was a similar one where I think a downstream entity was processing grievances, and there was a member self-selection to go to an IVR process, but they didn't understand that if the member was expressing dissatisfaction during that call, the system wasn't capturing that. And so there was a whole universe of grievances that they couldn't report out on. And then I would say the last bucket of universe issues would be universe issues where the sponsors already, or CMS has already identified that there's a problem in a certain field of data, and then when it gets resubmitted, the parent organization didn't fix it. So in one common one is for the written notification date, it was the date that the unit made the decision, but not the date that it went into the mail, out in the mail. They acknowledged that those should be 5 days later. Everybody agreed. Universe gets resubmitted. It's the exact same data we had before. So, just something to, kind of keep in mind. These are just the more general ones. I don't want to throw up everyone, but those are some of the ones to watch out for. Okay. So, slides 5 to 18 are one record layout from CDAG that I thought we would walk through very quickly. I don't want to bore you with too many details, and you can read what's on the screen and in your materials if you have printed them out. But I wanted everybody just to see what a record layout looks like in case you haven't seen them already. There are approximately 13 record layouts in ODAG and 15 in CDAG. That's how many universes you're submitting. Again, it might seem like a lot, but it's actually, as I said, just the same data broken down. So this particular record layout is for standard coverage determination exception requests. You can see we've got a field name, field type, field length, and description. All of the record layouts follow that format. There's a number of fields, and we try to give a description of everything that we want in those fields. So you can see we've got the beneficiaries Hicken, their first name, last name, the enrollment effective date, cardholder ID, contract ID, and plan ID. These field lengths are generally how many fields we would expect something to be. So contract ID is a good example. It's H1234 or S1234. We know that that's five fields, so that's what we would expect to see there. It's kind of a data integrity check that we have when we submit the record layouts. Patient residence, date the request was received, time the request was received. Was it approved or denied? Description of the issue. So if it was a denial, why did you deny it? What was the reason? NDC code, drug strength, name, dosage. And so it was an exception type. When you received the supporting statement, disposition of the request, was it denied for lack of medical necessity? Your decision date, time of plan decision, date effectuated in the plan system, time effectuated in the plan system, notification, both written and oral. If it was untimely, did you forward it to the IRE and when? And so I went through that quickly, but again, there's several of them. Go look at them. You can see that they're really detailed. We are asking for a lot of information, but we do use it to not only select our samples, but to evaluate your compliance, especially timeliness, which everybody knows we do at the universe level. So with that, I wanted to go through the new requirement for universe submission. So this is directly from the protocol, and I won't read it, but basically what it says is that you have a maximum of 3 attempts. And if we can't, if you can't get us the accurate data at that point, there are going to be some consequences to that. So, you know, I want to talk a little bit more about how we're going to implement that requirement and what it actually means and why we would do that. So you might be wondering, why would you put a limit on the number of submissions? Well, in years past, an organization who was able to get us clean, accurate universes in the initial submission, an organization who took 6 or 7 tries, got treated exactly the same way. There was no difference in how they were treated, and it doesn't seem very equitable or fair to me that an organization who got everything done in 2 weeks and another organization who took just shy of 2 months to get us data should be treated the same way. So what we did is we wanted to make sure that there would be some consequences to not meeting that 3-week deadline. Also, it's also extremely disruptive, I think, not only to your organization to have to constantly re-pull and resubmit universes, but it's very disruptive to the audit team who can't pull samples, who can't start portions of the audit while they're waiting on clean universes. So it's really also efficiency on our part. And of course, we all know everybody is responsible for being able to pull and submit accurate data to us. All right, so a little clarity on when the new requirement will be applied. The language in the protocol is probably a little bit stronger than I think we wanted to make it sound, so I wanted to take an opportunity to kind of clarify with individuals when it will be applied. So if data is so incomplete that we can't even select a sample and conduct our audit, in those situations, we will apply every applicable condition that could have been tested with that universe, and it will be at the ICAR level. So if you absolutely can't produce expedited coverage determinations, every applicable condition to that expedited coverage determinations universe will be automatically cited at the ICAR level. If, however, we have an issue with date and time, but we can still pull a sample. We know we have a sample of coverage determinations, but we can't confirm the validity of the dates and times. We'll still pull that sample. We're still going to conduct clinical decision making on that sample, since we know that there are actual real requests. But you're going to be cited all applicable timeliness conditions at the ICAR level because we wouldn't be able to verify that you were timely. So I think the protocol reads a little bit more strongly as if every condition will always be cited at an ICAR level for the entire thing. I think we didn't exactly mean to word it quite that strongly. So for those of you who are familiar with our audit scoring methodology, you know that for every CAR, we take the number of CARs and we multiply that by 1. So if you have 7 CARs, that's 7 points. We then take the number of ICARs you have and we multiply that by 2. So if you have 7 ICARs, that's 14 points. Then we add the points for CARs and ICARs together, which would be 21 points, and we divide by the number of audit elements. So if there was 3, you'd have an audit score of 7. So for those of you who are familiar with this, our audit scores are like golf scores. You want a lower score, not a higher score. So 7 is not a particularly good score, not the worst score we've seen, but it's not a good score. So you want to make sure that you don't find yourself in this boat because it can automatically really drastically impact your audit score. Additionally, you'll hear from Mike this afternoon about how egregious audit findings can lead to referrals, and CMPs and sanctions carry their own negative consequences, but all of this can also adversely affect star ratings, past performance. So it's really just something that you'd really want to avoid. And I think just as a last point, I wanted to also just say that another point in Charles' presentation that I meant to hit on earlier is he mentioned that he started small when he was doing his mock review or audit, and that he eventually graduated up to the full protocol. I would really highly recommend that you do that. If you just do some small portion of the audit protocol and you never kind of graduate to the full protocol, you'll never really know that you could have found everything that CMS might find when we come on site. So I think that was really a good model to follow, is to maybe start out small, but make sure you do graduate to doing the full internal audit. So with that, I'll stop with questions. I don't know, Stacey, do you want me to take the questions that we have already, or take some in the room?
We can start with the room.
Okay.
Okay, we do have time for questions. Are there any questions from our in-house audience?
Hi, Steve Altenberger from Visant. The descriptions on the record layout that was displayed there appear to be slightly different or modified than the previously web version. Will there be an updated release of the protocols and definitions?
Yes, there were. I think through feedback we received in our audit mailbox and just internal review, we found that there were some duplicate fields in certain record layouts, and just some things that, like 1 or 2 fields that I think probably shouldn't have been in certain record layouts. So it wouldn't be any more data. There would just be some fields that would be deleted because they were duplicate.
In the descriptions of each of those field records, will that be updated as well? Some of the descriptions, for instance, the disposition on that screen there included new elements that should be included, or new decision types.
Yeah. So that's a really good observation. We have, as Jen mentioned, through feedback that we've gotten in the audit mailbox, as well as for the audits that we've conducted so far, we have made clarifications to these descriptions to help sponsors better understand exactly what it is that we're looking for, and we will be providing updated protocols that will include the updates to the descriptions and the record layouts.
Okay, great. Yep. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. We're working on that. We're hoping that we have something out by the end of this month. And certainly, it's been noted previously that when you have your engagement letter follow-up, that's an opportunity to ask for questions. The auditors will also proactively provide you, if you are selected with audit, with any of the clarifications that aren't actually out there on the website, so that prior to submitting your universes, you have the most up-to-date information.
Okay, we are going to take a question from the viewing audience, and that question is as follows. SCD Audit Universe. For the data element description of the issue, can we get more clarity as to how the field should be populated? Should we populate the reject code or coverage determination type and then insert why we approved or denied the CD?
So that's the standard coverage determination universe record layout. So for that, I think what we were looking for is really the coverage determination type, and then we specifically asked that if it's a denial, that you would provide the reason for the denial.
Okay, the next question we have is SCDER, Audit Universe. Can CMS clarify if the plan sponsor should populate coverage determination reviews for excluded drugs?
So that's the exceptions request universe, and I'm going to say no, we're looking for Part D covered drugs in that universe.
Okay, the next question that was received is for DMRCD Audit Universe. For data element, was interest paid on the claim? We need more clarification on when a plan sponsor would pay interest on a claim to a member.
Good catch. That's an error. You would not pay interest to a member guilty of cutting and pasting from the payment reconsideration record layout. Will be included in the update and changes to the new protocol layouts when they're posted to the website.
And we have one last question here, and it says, for these audit universes, SIAM, DMRRE, and EIAM, should the plan sponsor populate coverage determination cases that have been dismissed by the IRE?
No, we are looking for cases that were overturned by the IRE. So we would not include, we wouldn't want you to include dismissals.
All right, that wraps it up for the questions that we have for Katie and Jen. So thank you, Katie and Jen. And thank you to all of those out there for submitting your questions, both in-house and virtual. Our next session will provide information to help the Part C and D sponsors gain an understanding of the importance of the strategic conversation process in creating a positive communication feedback loop. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Naida Patton from the Seattle Division of Medicare Health Plan Operations.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Naida Patton, and I am from the Seattle Regional Office. Do we have any Seattle Regional Office plans here? Show of hands. Yay, welcome. I'm also happy to see the plans that my other esteemed colleagues manage from the other 9 regional offices. I just wanted to say one quick thing about Charles's presentation, if I may. You know, I don't know if he realizes, I don't know where he is, but that he leaves valuable information, historical information, which is a problem we face as account managers when staff change across your organization. So, excellent job. During the session, I would like to share with you an example of the full cycle or life of an HPMS memo, one that we thought was extremely important, and I think it remains very valuable to plans. I want to talk a little bit about a process that was developed for the regional office account managers to ensure that sponsors are aware of memos, of policy decisions, of CMS requirements, of concerns or issues that may arise, and to make sure that account managers understand how regulations or requirements impact sponsors' ability to perform. And to spend a little time talking with you about a process that also allows you, sponsors, to provide suggestions and recommendations in a consistent and constructive manner. We think it adds a lot of value to the Part C and D account management program. Most of you may recall, and I think Jerry and others have mentioned this very important memo, which is one of 4 memos. It's the August 27th, 2014 memo that the Medicare Part C and D Oversight and Enforcement Group released. It was one, as I said, of 4. We in the regional office like to think of them as a set of memos that was issued to sponsors, and I have to tell you, this memo had some fantastic information. And so this memo was intended to help sponsors, sort of assess their risks and to take necessary action to correct on their own any compliance issues that they identified, and most certainly to improve their overall audit experience or outcome, and also to implement, where possible, best practices, because there were a lot of best practices in those memos. So, I don't know if a lot of you know a lot about qualified health plans and ACA. Are any of you familiar with that? Has anyone ever heard about these daggone enrollment files called 834 transactions? Anybody? Anyone ever? A little problematic, would you say? So I work with the ACA account management team, and as we implemented the qualified health plans across the country, we were having major problems with their enrollment files, and I'm not an enrollment expert by any means, but as account management, a part of that team, we needed to figure out what was causing the problem. So we came up with a way to actually talk to issuers, if you will, because that's what they're called in the ACA world. And what we decided to do, the account management team, the ACA account management team, was to develop a process that would allow us to put together specific questions, and the account managers would schedule or conduct strategic conversations with the issuers and then provide a summary of those conversations on a master spreadsheet so that we could extract that information. And therefore, we created the strategic conversation process. So that's where it was derived from. The problem was that as we implemented the ACA, we also have programs, as you know, under the Part C and D account management program. So our senior management and leadership made a decision that for account managers in the regional offices, we would move toward, if you will, that enterprise concept, meaning that you might have an account manager who does everything. They have QHPs, qualified health plans, and they have Part C and D plans. So when possible, wherever possible, what we wanted to do was to implement some of those processes from the ACA side of the house that might work for the Part C and D program. So we tried that. And we got permission to pilot the program, the strategic conversation for Part C and D, but we had a couple of goals in mind, as always, and that was to strengthen the communication between the account managers and sponsors, to encourage AMs to conduct strategic conversations with sponsors, because some of your account managers may have regular calls, some of them may have ad hoc calls, but we wanted them to have a conversation about specific issues, and we wanted to develop a process so that it was constructive and it was consistent. And we wanted to, of course, help drive improvement with everything that we do. And we wanted to allow or develop a positive feedback loop for sponsors to offer suggestions for future improvements. And so the account managers or AMs use the strategic conversation as a way to discuss the common conditions and best practice memos with sponsors. How many of you participated in strategic conversations with your account manager? Interesting. Okay. So during this conversation, if you didn't participate or you're not familiar with it, we actually work with the authors and the team who actually put out the August 27th memo. And that's how strategic conversations work with us in the regional office. We're connecting back to central office, our components and colleagues who are the subject matter experts depending on the area that we're targeting. And so we developed the questions with the team, and the questions you can see here on your screen were very basic. Have you read the memo? Have you reviewed the memo? Have you shared it with your staff? And specifically, have you shared it with senior leadership? And I think you heard Charles mention the importance of sharing information with senior leadership. Did you conduct an internal performance assessment? You know, have you evaluated yourself? We have a memo that shows you where the agency finds common conditions or findings. Are you looking at those areas too? What process or system changes have you implemented as a result of the memos? Did you find them helpful? What additional guidance would you like? And so The account managers conducted the conversations with all plans. There were approximately 118 sponsors. We did not include special plans like our PACE plans, those sort of plans. And remember, this was a palette. And what we did, we actually extracted from that master spreadsheet the comments. And the report, the internal report, sort of wrote itself because there were certain categories that your comments centered around. For example, as you see on the screen, a summary of responses, audit transparency, there were concerns there, audit technology assistance, we've heard about some of those issues this morning, sponsor training, the need for further training, hence today, sponsors' requests for guidance, and recommendations for future improvements. We took it very seriously, the account managers, as did the strategic conversation team. And what we did, we actually shared our internal report with the team that you met this morning, Jerry's team and his staff. We also shared the internal report with the account managers and the national audit team. And so the national audit team, the co-lead, specifically I think Ann Duarte, she's in the San Francisco regional office, was tasked with responding to some of the recommendations and suggestions that were provided during the strategic conversation. As a representative of that committee, I really am honored to share some of those responses with you today. So under summary of responses, sponsors, about 98% of them told us that they had actually reviewed the memos, they were aware of them, and they had shared them with their senior leadership. They took them very seriously. But still, we had 2% of sponsors who had not reviewed them, but promised to do so following the strategic conversation, as you might imagine. They told us that they used the information to improve their internal processes and to implement where possible best practices. They conducted risk assessments, they did mock audits, trained staff, and developed or enhanced their compliance plan. I want to read you something, and this was word for word one sponsor submitted during the conversations. These memos were an eye-opener as to the deficiencies found in our organization. And that just sort of speaks to us as account managers of not waiting until you receive that letter, as Charles said, but conducting ongoing review of requirements. Some sponsors shared that they thought their ability to perform well was based on these memos because the information was, well presented. Under audit transparency, sponsors expressed concern over the lack of transparency during audits, and they were a little concerned about the process that CMS uses to communicate audit information. For example, they wanted auditors to be on site during the first week of the audit, and they felt like CMS should provide pre-audit checklists to sponsors to help them get ready, and that CMS should share its entire audit methodology, tools, and scoring with sponsors. Further, sponsors wanted CMS to develop the standard audit format and materials that sponsors could use to help ensure compliance and train their staff, and to share the methodology CMS uses to select sponsors for audits, determine universes, and sample selections. And we've heard a lot of those responses already this morning. They suggested that auditors conduct sampling a little bit earlier in the audit process so that if they had questions or needed clarification, they could address them then. They also wanted CMS to provide sponsors with information regarding how CMS auditors are selected, credentialed, and how CMS actually monitors to ensure that there's audit interpretation consistency. So I'll just step through some of these very quickly because they've been talked about already this morning. As far as having auditors on site during the first week, you've heard that the compliance team is on site, but due to budgetary constraints that it's going to be difficult for CMS to have, those teams are fairly large on site. And also, it's in a little bit of a conflict with what we've heard from sponsors over time, that it's burdensome and it's a little overwhelming for their staff to have so many auditors on site. We are looking at ways to improve the communication during the webinar, but we welcome your suggestions to help us mediate this challenge. Sponsors wanted the CMS to develop a pre-audit checklist as a tool, and you can see here that CMS thought that suggestion was a good suggestion, and they are working to develop pre-audit checklists to assist sponsors in preparing for audits. Under the recommendation that CMS should share its entire methodology, tools, scoring, etc., you heard this morning that CMS already publishes a lot of that information. As far as audits, samples, how they're pulled, universe requests, you just heard from Jen, what's expected from the universe. This information is posted on the website, and it's also distributed when it's updated or enhanced through HPMS memos. The recommendation for standard audit format was addressed in the same or responded in the same method. Just CMS does have standard audit materials, and they are posted on the website. CMS has developed training which we didn't see from sponsors as we conducted strategic conversations about information that they were aware of on MedLearn Matters. So for example, and they're free of charge and they're public, there are specific trainings related to compliance, CDAG, ODAG on MedLearn Matters. So that's information that you could use to help you train staff. CMS uses a variety of information to determine the risks for plans and when they're audited, but a lot of that information plans have. For example, star ratings and past performances and information or data that you yourself report to CMS. I think generally speaking, plans could expect to be audited within a 3 to 5 year cycle. So prepare. Auditors conduct sampling earlier in the audit process was another suggestion. And CMS valued this recommendation and this request. We wanted to share with you, and I think you've heard this this morning, that at any time during the audit, if you have a question, if there is a concern that you haven't had enough time during the audit, please confer with the audit lead. I'll just pick on Ms. Holmes, who's here. She happens to be sitting not far from me, but as we conducted strategic conversations, her name came up time and time again because sponsors really gave her a lot of accolades because they felt like she was always available to answer their questions or concerns or to provide clarification. So you have a lot of ways to get that support or get your questions answered. Under the recommendation that sponsors provide information about how auditors are selected, credentialed, and how CMS ensures consistency across audits, I think Jerry and Tawanda mentioned this morning, but for the 2015 audit cycle, CMS is using core teams, and I think it was Tawanda who said if that core team lead is the compliance lead, there are a group who meet on a regular basis and they discuss compliance issues. I know I've been on calls with Durrell just to talk about some issues just to make sure we're consistent and we're going to issue the same sort of information or findings or conditions across all audits in that particular area. And by the way, in the regional office, we really like that concept. Sponsors needed assistance with audit data requirements. They wanted a data dictionary. You've heard today from Jen and others that there's information about the universe. I do think that CMS will, in the future, work on a data dictionary. I'll just jump down to the update with the audit guides. As you know, when that information is updated, which is annually for the most part, CMS does distribute this information via HPMS memos, and it's also published on the website. Under sponsor training, I think today is just an excellent example, but CMS got a lot of compliments during the strategic conversations on its efforts to conduct training. One of the things that sponsors indicated they wanted more of was training on how to implement some of the best practices in the memos and to how to shift that random sampling to a more targeted audit approach, and also for CMS to conduct audit workshops, sort of that one-on-one audit workshops, and to use webinars to conduct audit workshops. So CMS, we were also asked to conduct audit webinars that will address how to implement the best practices, as I just said, and we're going to explore ways to do that. You know, it's a little tricky sometimes. Just making sure everything's in place, subject matter experts are there. So it is on the radar for consideration. So for requests for additional guidance, it sort of ran the gamut, but I put a few examples here for you. For special needs plans, model of care, sponsors indicated that they wanted more guidance. Under formulary administration, but they didn't tell us specifically what under formulary administration they needed help with. They needed additional details about these best practices, how they work for some plans, additional information regarding root cause analysis, and I think Charles did an excellent job of discussing how his plan looks at root cause analysis. Guidance on compliance areas that CMS is not currently reviewing, for example, enrollment or marketing or sales. And one sponsor indicated that they wanted to be prepared if CMS shifted gears, for example, for 2016, so that they would be ready for these areas. And hospice claims. Also, sponsors indicated that they wanted to know about the auditor's preferences so that they would be able to meet the auditor's expectations. And I think the core group that we talked about will take care of that point. As far as hospice claims, model of care, CMS will consider those moving forward. So, recommendations for improvement. Sponsors wanted a risk-free way for sponsors to ask questions, just sharing. They wanted CMS to develop a FAQ audit database and to offer those audit one-on-one seminars and to develop an industry workforce focus work group. We see a lot of those work groups out in the San Francisco, California area, and they're good. And they also wanted CMS, we hear this a lot, to have their contractors use CMS email when they're communicating with sponsors doing audits. So the responses. So CMS most certainly, just like we in the regional offices, want you to feel free to express your concerns to us. However, CMS will explore options that will allow you to submit questions without identifying who you are. Unfortunately, as far as the frequently asked audit database, CMS cannot support that request at this time. So for suggestions for a industry-focused work group, most certainly CMS welcomes sponsor feedback from audit processes. They've conducted numerous listening sessions with the industry. And I think it was mentioned today, we strongly encourage you to do so. If you go through the audit process, make sure that you take the online survey and you can provide whatever feedback you like. And also remember that you have the audit mailbox. So at any time, you can provide comments or feedback. Under the suggestion that CMS contractors use CMS email, of course, we understand the challenge that that presents, but the agency cannot issue contractors, a CMS address or email address. However, what the agency can do is make sure sponsors are aware of who the contractors are and their email addresses, so that when they're communicating with you, their emails don't go into your junk mail or your spam folders. In conclusion, I'd just like to share from a regional office perspective that strategic conversations really does provide a means for sponsors to offer constructive recommendations and suggestions for improvements. It really has been an effective and consistent communication tool for us in the regional offices that provides real-time information, and it creates a positive feedback loop. I would be remiss if I didn't thank all of you on behalf of the regional office account managers, the regional office management team, and the regional office account management business functional leads. That's Judy Flynn. She's the Associate Regional Administrator from the Kansas City Regional Office, and Brenda Suter, who's the Associate Regional Administrator from the Seattle Regional Office. On behalf of that entire team, we want to thank those of you who have participated in strategic conversations. Thank you.
Okay, we do have time for questions. So if anyone in our audience has a question, please move to the microphone in the center of the room. And I guess we don't have any questions from our in-house audience. So I do have one question that came from our viewers, and that question is the August 27, 2014 memo a comprehensive summary of all the memos? Or do we need to go back to the first three to make sure we don't miss a common condition or best practice?
Would you like to answer that?
So it's not comprehensive, but what we do have a column that shows you how many times it's repeated, and there are several of them where it's 4 out of 4. So if you see one that's 4 out of 4, you know that it appeared in all of the 3 previous memos. If you see one that's new, you know it's a brand new one. So you could go back and look at all of them, but it's not comprehensive. It's a very lengthy document, as you well know. So I think if we kept every condition that we found, even the ones that were no longer seen as like the top 5 or 6, it would really exponentially grow the memo. So we try to keep it to the ones that are the most current for each memo.
Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, then I would like to thank Naida for the information on the process. Okay, we will now be taking our lunch break. We will begin our session this afternoon promptly at 2:45 Eastern Daylight Time. For our in-house guests, please visit the cafeteria located downstairs, and if you pre-ordered a lunch, you can pick it up at the Jazzman Cafe. We will see you at 12:45. Oh, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. 12:45? Sorry, not 2:45. Maybe that was some wishful thinking. I don't know. But thank you. Thank you.